be joining us in real time on Zoom, or if you tune in at some point later, you'll catch us on YouTube. So welcome now, and any other time you may find yourself able to watch the proceedings of the Town Council. And as I call this meeting to order, I would like to also acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, which is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So we'll move right into our order of business. We've got 2 hours allotted for this meeting and a very full agenda with a couple of presentations we look forward to hearing. And note as we look at the agenda to make a motion of approval that there are priority items in bold. And Councillor Rister, thank you. I believe you're moving the agenda be approved, and Councillor Croft is seconding that motion. All in favor? Any opposed?
Your Worship, it's
I've got to.
There is an addition to the agenda if Council is prepared to consent to that. The 8th resolution that was circulated about 2 hours ago.
Okay. I'm not sure if I am in, that was added to the agenda package or added through email, Mr. Burke?
I believe Kelly had forwarded or posted it to all of the members of Council and suggested that with consent of Council, it could be added to the agenda. It's essentially dealing with the dates for advance poll and alternative voting days.
Your Worship, it's B speaking, and that was added to the agenda, circulated to Council, and added to the agenda package. So I assume from the motion of Council, and having conferred with you earlier, that that was acceptable, Your Worship, but it is good to bring it to Council's attention again.
Yeah, it seems like we have a very unstable connection. I actually paused in going through the vote because I couldn't see, and it looked like several councillors were frozen, and Ms. Renton's voice is coming through to me very broken, which normally isn't the case. So I hope we are able to get through this without any further technical difficulty. Yes, there is an 8th resolution that would come to us under 5A1 or I. So Council will have that information if they haven't seen it already. It's there for their reference. So with the suggestion is the motion then put to Councillor Risser to approve agenda as amended. Could we add that, or is there further discussion required on this item?
And Your Worship, your signal is, and your image is frozen as well at times.
Okay. If you'll bear with me a moment, I'm going to, it may be me, so I'll just take a moment. Excuse me, if I can.
Does that cool you off a little bit?
Oh, get that snow off of there, for God's sake.
Thought it might cool you off a little bit.
Yeah, no, don't need that.
Yeah, hello again, everyone. Sorry for that interruption. It is apparently the hard patch to my computer here at the office is no longer here as a result of some updates. It was inadvertently taken out. So looks like the issue may be with me. I'll see if I can resolve that, but we'll try to carry on in the meantime, since I don't have the equipment at the ready. I've asked for some help. So with that all being said, yes, Councillor Mosier.
Thanks, Your Worship. Well, regarding this additional item, if something comes in 2 hours before a meeting, I don't know how relevant this is, but I certainly don't have time to look at it within 2 hours of a meeting. So, you know, I don't know what this particular item's about, but I just assumed the agenda was the agenda as printed off when we originally got it.
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, from what I can see of the resolutions, including the 8th one, they're almost all housekeeping kinds of things that I don't think will take much time. So I think it'd be fine to add the 8th one. It's just to confirm the dates of the alternate voting. So not a big deal.
It is certainly consistent with the others that are the previous 7, and it is not a lot of information, but I certainly point well taken, Councillor Mosier. We certainly do try to avoid that as regular practice for sure.
Your Worship,
Yes,
the
Mr.
returning
Burke?
office, yeah. I was just going to mention, Your Worship, the returning officer advised us of that late yesterday. So if otherwise we might need a special meeting. I think Mr. Burke has indicated, and perhaps that's what he was going to say before I interrupted him. I apologize.
So it is date related, so therefore time sensitive, I assume. Is that?
Yes, Your Worship. The forms and procedures for alternative voting have to be done at least 60 days before the election, which will be August 16th. And the forms and procedures do have to incorporate the alternative voting days and advanced polling days. And if I had done this before, I would have appreciated that resolution had to be done in advance of that date as well. We're all kind of working our way through this because it's a new procedure for all of us. And I do apologize for having it added on at the last minute.
Thank you. So getting back to where we started with this, it is the approval of the agenda, and whether it's an approval of the agenda as we first saw it or as amended. I look again to the mover and seconder to lead the way on what we need to vote on.
Well, we voted on the agenda, but I'm happy to approve an amended agenda by unanimous consent.
Okay, and you're right, we did vote. I didn't complete the vote because I couldn't frankly see everyone vote, so I didn't know what the participation was. So if everyone did vote in the affirmative, I apologize, but I couldn't see that. So we could just proceed as an amended agenda. I would appreciate that. And
I'm fine with that.
okay, thank you. And with your agreement, Councillor Croft, as seconder.
I'm sort of torn between that because I have not read it at all, haven't seen it at all, so I guess it's something we would have to review, so.
Well, if we can pause at that point in the agenda to see if it's more information than councillors can properly consider in a timely manner, then we certainly can postpone consideration of that particular resolution. Thank you then. All in favor then of the amended agenda? Thank you, and it was a unanimous vote, so in favor, so that motion is approved. And I look now for a motions to approve the minutes of June 23rd, July 9th, and July 21st, collectively or individually, as you wish.
I would so move all three collectively.
I think we've lost Rachel.
I hear you. So carry on, and seconded by Councillor Bachmann. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. I didn't see myself vote, sorry. That's why I didn't say it was unanimous, but it is. So motion's carried and those minutes are approved, and I'm just going to take a pause to see if I can get this internet plugged in. Thanks.
Can the deputy mayor carry on with the meeting until Rachel's mayor's straightened out?
Let's give her another 30 seconds or so, Danny. I'm sure she's just plugging in a cable.
Apologies again, but I'm all plugged in, so hopefully no more technical glitches. So that was an unexpected and unanticipated little bypass. So moving right now, we are at the point in our agenda when we're looking to hear from special guests who have asked for an opportunity to make presentations to council. And we are expecting 2 today. So I'd look to Ms. McCallum to confirm if our guests are here. First of all, we're looking for Donna Kelly, who's president of the Royal Canadian Legion branch number 23, our local branch. And she had looked to speak with us with regard to amendments to our parking bylaw with respect to veterans and their parking in our town. So Donna, I think you are with us. So thank you very much for making the time and bringing this issue of concern to our attention. And you are welcome to address the group.
Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. I had written a letter when I had seen your parking amendments regarding the veterans parking and the at meters in the town of Lunenburg. First of all, may I say that I am very pleased that the town of Lunenburg had taken the opportunity to allow veterans to not have to feed meters within the town of Lunenburg as a thank you for their service. It's very much appreciated by veterans who visit here quite often during the summer. And when I tell them that they don't need to feed the meters, they're very receptive and have a wonderful feeling regarding the town. They're being welcomed here, and the fact that their service is appreciated. When I read the article in the newspaper regarding the amendment to your bylaws today, I had a number of veterans come to me and speak because they were concerned that their service was only going to be for 2 hours or 4 hours or a half hour, no matter what was on the meter. So instead of telling them, we're happy to have you here and thank you for your service, I was, and they felt as well, that it was like, thank you for your service, but you can only stay here for a half an hour and you have to move your car, or an hour and you have to move your car. And I understand fully what parking meters are all about and about keeping traffic moving in the town of Lunenburg. But I, for one, most veterans who come here from other branches park in our current parking lot at the Legion. But we have many veterans who travel here from all over Canada. And when they have a veteran's plate, to be afforded this exception to the parking meter bylaw is really respectful to them and very much appreciated by them. So I just wanted to appear today to tell you that I would like to have a veteran's exemption to any time limits with respect to the parking meters should a veteran park there. It's not like we're being overrun by thousands of veterans in the town of Lunenburg. And I think that we should celebrate their service and say thank you by allowing them to park wherever they choose to. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Donna. Thank you for, as I said, bringing the concerns of those who brought it to your attention to our attention, and being a very strong advocate for veterans. And we do very much appreciate their service and don't want to have that misunderstood. So,
And I just wanted to say, for the benefit of the council, that once my email was received by your worship, she took the time to call me herself and discuss this with me to make sure that she fully understood what my concern was at the time. And I appreciate that very much, your worship.
you're very welcome. So there is an opportunity for this to be further discussed on our later on our agenda when we consider the amendments to this particular bylaw, which were on the agenda to be discussed today. But certainly while Ms. Kelly is with us, if there are any questions, clarification as to the concern or specifics that you would like to ask her about, I'm sure she would be more than happy to speak to them. So
I certainly would. Yes.
Any questions? Yes, Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Worship. Donna, I agree with what you're saying. I was just curious what qualifies a veteran for special place?
The application goes through Access Nova Scotia. And there are two ways that you can get it. One is by the Veterans Affairs Canada definition of a veteran, which means everybody who has served in wartime, merchant marine, that type of thing, according anyone who's receiving pensions from Veterans Canada. And also serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces, they have to provide to Provincial Command at Halifax, the Legion Provincial Command, a copy of their serving ID card, plus a copy of their service record. And that gets signed off by Provincial Command prior to being sent to the Registry of Motor Vehicles in order to be processed. So there's very strict criteria. The two definitions, one is the Legion definition of a veteran, and the other one is the Veterans Affairs definition of the veteran. And the only difference between the two is one has to do with boot camp, and the other one is not boot camp, it's serving members. For example, I would be eligible to have a veteran's plate. I have not applied for one because I don't consider myself a veteran at this point. Perhaps when I retire after 30 years of service, I may apply. But we do have an awful lot of young veterans in the area who have not applied either. But I was speaking with a gentleman last evening, for example. He had served many, many years ago. And he said, "Oh, am I eligible for a veteran's plate?" And I said, "Yes, you are." And I said, so I just printed off an application for him actually. But we're not like we have hundreds of people. We may have, a dozen maximum people that I know about in the area who have veterans plates. And I know the town of Bridgewater is, you can park anywhere in the town of Bridgewater and you don't have to worry about this. So worrying about time limits, I think is really restricting what the whole purpose of you folks granting that exemption in the first place was all about.
Great. Thank you very much. That was very good information to have as well.
Not
Anything
everybody
else?
can get a veteran's plate.
Yeah, no, it's just certainly a process. And service required.
Yes.
Attached to that. Yeah. So if there aren't any questions, this does come up again under 5A2 of the agenda. So we will certainly be considering that food for thought you've provided us in discussion of the bylaw.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to have to leave you because I have to get back to work. But thank you very much for hearing me today. I really appreciate it. And the veterans that I serve appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. Okay, so when we have a second presentation slotted for today's agenda, and for that we're looking to Jessica Hepburn, citizen of the town of Lunenburg, and a very busy businesswoman as well as a community activist who's looking to speak with respect to a response to petition on renaming some streets, Cornwallis and Creighton streets in particular, within our town. There you are. Welcome, Jessica. Thank you very much for making time in your busy day to speak to us on this important issue. So I will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you all. I really appreciate it. And especially thank you to Mayor Bailey for reaching out to me to ensure that I submitted the presentation, as I was not sure if I was going to make this meeting or a following one. So there's a fair bit of content. I'm not going to read through the entire thing, but I'll go through the most pertinent points and then offer the opportunity for questions. So July 1st, 2020, I created a petition online on to evaluate the support for, as well as the opposition to, renaming Cornwallis and Crichton streets. That is the two streets that I live on the block in between, on Townsend Street. So I walk past them every day and I'm quite aware of them, and as well as aware of the growing Canada-wide conversation, the memorialization of those folks, specifically Cornwallis. Shortly afterwards, an Indigenous person in Bridgewater, partly inspired by my petition, created a similar one for Bridgewater in consultation with elders, asking also for the Cornwallis Street to be renamed. I'm a resident homeowner in Lunenburg. I've owned our home here for about 8 years. My daughter started at the Lunenburg daycare and then went to primary and is going to be in grade 5. And then my oldest child just graduated from grade 9 at the Blues Academy. So we've invested our time here. I'm also of Black and Jewish descent. So the conversations that are happening within the wider community, as well as locally, impact me personally, as well as my family and people that I love and I care for. So the petition was in response to the larger Black Lives Matter conversation that's happening that has helped legitimize these conversations globally and as well as in Canada. But it's also a response to the experience of myself and other racialized community members and visitors and friends reaching out to me and sharing their experiences over time, and especially right now, specifically feelings of being unsafe or unwelcome, and feelings of being to raise conversations about racism systemically, interpersonally, or historically. So while there's been hundreds of signatures in support of this the petition, and many people reaching out to say that they have been supportive, there's also been a backlash of hateful messages, threats, insults, that I'm not intelligent, that I am not sane, that I would like to erase the history of the community. And I think that it's really important to say that I love the history of our community, and that is why I've done this work and doing this research. So I think it's very harmful for these conversations to be shut down and to not be legitimized. The attempt to have the conversation and to share a post on the Lunenburg Facebook page that was very much like, hey neighbors, let's have a respectful conversation about changing these street names, as well as this research that I have that is not visible. Posts were never published, and I was in fact banned from that Facebook page. That creates a chilling atmosphere in terms of bringing forward these conversations, and my goal with coming forward to council is to have council legitimize those conversations. So in light of the reaction to the petition, I would like to urge the town of Lunenburg to do the following. The first is to make a public statement on the town website, social media, and to the press that condemns racism in our community and recognizes both historic and current systemic racism. And I would like to see us commit to building an anti-racist community. We can do that by creating an anti-racism initiative in Lunenburg that's led by Black, Indigenous, and people of color that are compensated for their time and supported by Black, Indigenous, and people of color organizations or representatives. The reasons for that are included in additional information that I'm not going to go through during this presentation, but the concerns around diversity and inclusion committees or anti-racism task forces that are not compensated and that do not have members at the table that have power and resources and the capacity to do this work often just marginalizes the people who participate in them and can actually be quite harmful. So I'd like to see a staff report on incidences of systemic racism and racial violence in the town of Lunenburg that includes a review of allocation of budget to equity-seeking projects or initiatives that are led by Black, Indigenous, and people of color residents, whether those residents and visitors are represented in town marketing or social media, and to explore systemic biases in elections, hiring, recruitment, and newcomer outreach. This report should be available in council meetings and to discuss in public. I think it's also important, I have reviewed the entirety of the Project Lunenburg draft consultation, that draft document be reviewed by anti-racism professionals that are and members of the community prior to the finalization or implementation to ensure that the final draft has been looked at through an anti-racist lens. Currently, while it does include the erasure of Mi'kmaq history and the importance of including more of that signage, signage. It does not include other residents of color or the Black community or the Black history that has been erased. And also to hire Black, Indigenous, and people of color anti-racism facilitators and consultants to provide this training so that we have a common language to speak from to council and to staff. Sometimes a budget can be a concern. I've done anti-racism work. Typically, an educator charges between $4 to $6 an hour. Those funds can be offset by allowing other people like the Chamber of Commerce and members of the business community to participate in these programmings to ensure that we have a safe and welcoming community for all people who visit, residents, and as well as the tourists that we welcome to our community that are quite diverse. A timeline for review and updating Cornwallis and Crichton streets and all interpretive signage to include Mi'kmaq and Black history created in consultation with those communities as called for in my initial petition. Quickly. And to publicly recognize the colonial slaveholding past that led to violence against Mi'kmaq communities, such as Essakatik, by people like Cornwallis, and enslaved Black people in Lunenburg, such as Sylvia by Crichton or Lydia Jackson by Dr. Bullman. Those are histories that require extensive digging to find, unless you are a member of the African diaspora or the Black community, in which case you are probably familiar with those stories, as I was familiar with those stories growing up in Vancouver. So I think it is incumbent upon council and our elected leaders to do this work. These resources have existed for decades. There have been Black-led initiatives. We're not a stranger to the conversation about racism. And if we see how extraordinarily quickly, with lots of activism and lots of movement from the communities, but how the LGBTQ+ community has been able to make significant inroads and have these conversations legitimized at the leadership level, we could see how far behind we are in bringing forward conversation racism. So the resources for Canadian municipalities to address and commit to racism have been available, like I said, for decades, and I've linked to a lot of those resources. It is currently right now the African Nova Scotian Decade for people of African descent. That decade runs until 2024. So there is still time for Lunenburg to participate in that decade and the recognition of what people of African descent have brought to Canada as well as to Lunenburg specifically. There are resources available through the Department of African Nova Scotian Affairs, and there is specifically UNESCO resources through the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. So I'm gonna allow through those resources at another time, and I'm just gonna move on quickly to the content of the petition. So the petition that I originally put forward is to call on the town of Lunenburg to do the following: to rename Cornwallis Street to Essakatik Street, which was the original name of the community, to rename Crichton Street to Sylvia Street in recognition of Sylvia, and to replace the Mirligesh interpretive panel that's located at the Old French Cemetery with updated, accurate information that's done in consultation with the Mi'kmaq community, including that the village of Mirligesh was ordered destroyed by Edward Cornwallis. Also to install an interpretive panel in consultation with the Black Nova Scotian community beside the current plaques that recognize Colonel Crichton to honor Sylvia of Lunenburg and acknowledge Lunenburg's slaveholding past. These are small steps that we can take towards demonstrating a commitment to anti-racism and recognizing how Mi'kmaq and Black communities have been negatively impacted by Lunenburg's colonial history and racism in our community, and also an opportunity to educate visitors and locals. The reasons for those name changes are included, and there's been multiple different processes that I've seen. The town of Kentville agreed to a 30 to 60 day resolution to renaming Cornwallis Street. The Sydney, Nova Scotia has already removed the Cornwallis name. Some communities are doing like a list of names to choose from in consultation with the impacted communities. So this is just one suggestion for how that could look, and suggestions of people who are part of Lunenburg's history that are currently invisible that should be recognized. I could keep talking, but cognizant of your time.
Yeah. So great. No, thank you very much. I wasn't sure that you were finished. I didn't want to cut you off. I know you have a lot you can offer to us in discussion of this important topic or range of important subject matter. And so appreciate the time it took for you to put this together, the thought that went into developing the petition, the very thoughtful and thorough information you've provided us in preparing this presentation and in the correspondence. So appreciate that very much, Jessica. Likewise, we have an opportunity a little further on in the agenda, but actually quite soon, and we could move that up too, but would like to delve into this a little more thoroughly today, and we intend to. I think I just start off by saying that having already spoken to, I think, all of my council colleagues on this, and having spoken extensively with members of our senior staff here at the town of Lunenburg, that there's no issue with making a public statement because I think I can speak without reservation that the town of Lunenburg is wholeheartedly and emphatically condemns racism in whatever form it may manifest itself, and has so in this community. So I think we, as you suggest, we need to make a strong statement to that effect, and that can and that was just done, but it can be done more broadly and more inclusively, as you've suggested. As I said, without hesitation on our part, and just how we deal with what you've raised as an issue. I think through the forum of creating the petition has given us the opportunity to talk about this in a much more holistic way, and you and I have discussed that somewhat as well. So I just don't want to hog the floor, and while it's fresh in our minds, your presentation offered the opportunity for any members of council to ask questions or speak directly to you, Jessica, at this time. So the floor is open. Questions, comments, thoughts. When Jessica has a chance to respond. And I don't know, Jessica, if you are needing to be as Donna had other commitments, or if you have a little bit of time when we have this further on the agenda, if we can reach out to you for questions.
I would be available, yeah.
Okay. So pressure's off a little bit then, I guess, what I'm seeing for members of council, if they have questions or anything to offer at during this presentation phase. And I'm not seeing any, so you've been very thorough. So I think
Mary, you can't ask anything.
So it is in the next, the next numbered item of our agenda that is the opportunity for us to discuss this more fully. So if you are able to hang out, and if there is a question that we can ask or if there's questions we need to ask of you, the opportunity will still be there.
Excellent.
So thanks again very much. This is important stuff.
Thank you.
So moving on, then we do have, we'll move right into the next portion of our agenda, which is correspondence, petitions, and proclamations and consideration thereof. So there are items that's bulleted, and the final one on this list is bolded, and the final one on this list is bolded, but in the interests of getting through as much material as possible, I would suggest we start from the top, just because it makes it easier, and work our way to the end of the list. If our time is getting to be noticeably short, we'll certainly divert our attention directly to the bolded items on our agenda. So under the first item under correspondence is correspondence with respect to approval of funding, which is one of the wonderful pieces of correspondence we love to receive. And so we're grateful to Region 6 for the approval of funding for the purchase of our street litter sorting stations. And Balda was kind enough to work with me and other members of our staff to put together this application for funding. And it's certainly referenced when we talk about the waste reduction strategy later on. So appreciate that. I don't think there's any further questions or comments, but please alert me if there are. And next, under 4B, Nova Scotia Communities, Culture and Heritage letter requesting comments to their proposed Heritage Protect Property Act amendments respecting removal of authority to demolish a municipal heritage property after a 3-year period if initially disallowed by the municipality, and also development deferral authority for 1 year when a heritage conservation plan and bylaw are prepared. And that is very specific to the work of our Heritage Advisory Committee and to our responsibility for a heritage conservation district as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And we are a bit of an anomaly in that we're a living, breathing heritage district, which is very much largely privately owned, which has some challenges and is not always duly considered when making legislation at other levels of government. So it's important that we do weigh in on things like this. So there's been a suggestion on the agenda that we propose that staff reply for councils or provide a response for our consideration with respect to this, so that we're fully apprised of any potential issues with the amendments to this particular act of the province. Any member of council willing to make a motion to that effect? Councillor Risser, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Mosier, that we asked the staff, presumably Mr. McDonald, for a draft response for our consideration at the September meeting or prior to the deadline, which could probably be done at a meeting in September of council. Is there any further discussion or questions around that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Also a notice from the municipality of the District of Lunenburg with regard to their transfer of the roles of their area advisory committees to their planning advisory committee, as they do the heavy lifting and providing more full planning documents or planning documents for their entire municipality. So I commend them on that effort. It's a big job, and that is supplied to us for our information as an abutting municipality, and I'm sure duly noted by our staff in planning. So no, I think further comments on that required. Provincial Volunteer Awards, notice of the September 28th virtual event. When the pandemic first began, there was I think a hope that we would just be postponing the recognition of volunteers throughout the province from the typical spring, April celebration to one in the fall, but that has since been deemed to be not advisable, of course, given the ongoing public emergency because of the pandemic. So the virtual event is being planned, and so we certainly would want to celebrate our representative volunteer, Mr. Hardiman, and also all of the volunteers in the community and throughout the province. So that's information on how that will be done, and I'm sure we'll be publicizing that more fully as the date grows closer. Also, letter with respect to the Organization of World Heritage Cities, requesting our becoming a part of that organization. We do get regularly invited to participate or become a part of that a very distinguished group of other cities throughout the world. Quebec City, I think, is one of the leading participants and partners in that organization. To mine, I don't know, we have not in my experience on council, but I don't know if there was any attempt in previous councils to join. But certainly the fee for joining is significant, and the value has not been deemed, I guess, worth the investment. So we have not to date, but thought it was important that council and public are aware of the invitations we receive in that regard. But if there aren't any questions on that or further discussion or indications that we should do otherwise than we have been, and please let me know. And we'll move on then with the report from the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing on our 2019 municipal profile and financial condition indicators rather. And this is the first time I think we've seen a report that's as comprehensive as this, but we've been working with financial condition indicators for a few years now, and have I'm very pleased to report that the town of Lunenburg fares very well in these reports, and there's always room for improvement, and they do point those things out to us. And there's also room for debate in some cases where there's the interpretation of the philosophies, the ideologies around some of the practices can be challenged, but it's very good information to have and to have compiled for us and to have compiled throughout the province. So I've asked Ms. Dagley if she would just speak to it, since she's the best versed, I think, as our finance director, just to highlight, if she would, what's most beneficial or what can be gleaned from this report.
Thank you, Your Worship. I know you have a very full agenda, so just a couple brief comments, perhaps. As council members may recall, that we reviewed the draft version of these indicators back in our audit training session back in November of 2019. Overall, as Your Worship has indicated, I'm very pleased with the town's FCI report with 9 green indicators for such items as our budget accuracy, tax collection, debt servicing. The town is challenged with building our reserves. And this is the area which we've received our 2 red indicators. This, unfortunately, is a common challenge for Nova Scotia towns due to our higher infrastructure capital requirements versus those of our rural counterparts. To move the town's operating reserve indicator to a green requires an investment of $1.2 million. So it will take us some time to achieve that objective. Overall, the province has assessed the town as a moderate risk. 10 plus indicators on green move you to a low risk. We have 9 indicators. 42% of the towns in Nova Scotia are in that moderate risk category because of the infrastructure load. And that combined with those in high risk is 43% of the towns are in some level of risk overall within Nova Scotia. And that has, as previously been discussed within the council table, leads us right back to provincial funding for towns versus rural municipalities. And that I'm sure the conversation will continue, Your Worship.
No question. Thanks very much. appreciate that that Coles Note version. It's actually a very readable and well laid out report, and as I said, very good information to have and to hold for discussion purposes. And so there's our 9 instead of 10 greens. We're doing very well. A couple of yellows and a couple of reds, but as there's certainly explanations and context that needs to be discussed in looking at any and all of those numbers, but they are very worthwhile information to have for discussion, and things that we refer to and work towards, as Ms. Dagley mentioned, goals of going from one to another. So are there any questions or further comments from anyone on council with respect to that report? Great, then we will move on. Thank you very much, Ms. Dagley. To a Lunenburg Academy Foundation letter of approval of capital funding requests, and that was from an earlier discussion of council, and we're very pleased that the foundation is such a strong and committed and engaged partner in the preservation of our precious Lunenburg Academy, and they're working diligently to help finance the costs of looking after that important building. And so they have committed to significant funds to the ongoing work of developing the building and surrounding property. So that brings us to the H4H, which is circles back to the petition that was brought to our attention through the presentation from Jessica Hepburn earlier in the meeting, and the opportunity to discuss the what the petition certainly is representative of. And so I again would thank Jessica for raising this issue as an opportunity for us to look at our community within the broader context of what's been going on. Where, unless you're under a rock, I think you have to know that issues of racism and looking at the way history is commemorated and who's present and who's absent is a discussion throughout the province, throughout the country, and around the world. And just last night on the news, they were talking about McGill University and the founder of that, and the founder and namesake of that university being questionable, and something being considered, changes being considered with respect to the commemoration there with statues and so on. So it's definitely a current topic, but it's one that is also prevalent in our own community, and so deserves our particular attention. I think that it's important that, as Ms. Hepburn suggested, that the petition raise the issue, and perhaps the addressing the petition needs to be done in a broader context. And I can, I'd look around the council table, and as I said, I've spoken to each of you about this concern and approach moving ahead. And it's not just the naming of streets, but what the naming of streets represents. And while there's concern, and Jessica pointed out some of the pitfalls of forming committees and task force, I think that the need to educate ourselves and to help educate the community and to do the research and investigate the circumstances within our community of racism that exists and is being exercised, that we need to dedicate a committee or a group of a time, a focus to that effort. And the best way I see us enabled to do that is by creating some form of special committee to delve into it. And then I cite a recent success with the waste reduction working group that had a very short window of time to do its work, but it focused and it produced a report that we'll be looking at later today. But it was very successful because it pulled in stakeholders who had particular interest in this area. And again, as Jessica suggested, we need to consult. We need to bring in stakeholders, voices, other perspectives to help us deal with racism and discrimination as it may exist, and to deal with and to try to embrace inclusion and diversity in our community. So, any other thoughts from other members of council? Yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I certainly agree with everything you've said, and I thank Jessica as well for bringing this forward. It's hard not to feel at times, particularly being a, cisgendered heterosexual white male, that you're ill-equipped in terms of the lived experience on some of these issues. So I think in setting up that committee, it'll be important that, we seek out the right people in framing the terms of reference who have that lived experience, who can guide us in terms of what we need to be looking at.
Yeah, I agreed. Well said. Anyone? Yes, Councillor Mosher?
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, and this is important. I mean, how can we expedite, making this happen? It's, who do we look upon? Do we look upon staff here to start to get this ball rolling for us? As Jessica said, it's the conversation that's the most important part, and that will enlighten everyone's behavior in the future. So, the quicker we can get on with this, the better.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's important that we put something in place right away. And that's frankly why I kind of look to our ability to set up a special committee. That special committee can be comprised of whatever we determine it should be eventually. And so I think as we've all been saying, I think we need to consult further as to who those stakeholders are. How do we find them? How do we begin? And what might a special committee look like? Keeping in mind the advice and I guess the pitfalls that were pointed out to us, and also, I mean, I'm not sure if any was. I know Heather and I tuned in, and some of you may have also had chance to look at the webinar that was just put forth by Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, and it was on creating municipal action plans for ending racism and discrimination. So there are some best practices out there, or actually a lot of that webinar was some of our neighboring municipalities pointing out some of the same pitfalls that Jessica mentioned in her advice to us in her presentation, that they have good intentions, but have had to revamp a few times. And I don't think the fear of doing it wrong should stop us from getting something started. So asking staff to consult and to bring back a report for us as to taking some of this advice into consideration, look to some of these folks for consultation, and perhaps bring back to us a recommendation on what a special committee of Lunenburg town would look like. Yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just wondering if Heather can restore Jessica's speaking rights in case there's anything she would want to add to the deliberations.
I will do so just now. There she is.
Hello. So I trust you've been hearing our discussion thus far. Yes.
Yes.
So we're looking to move ahead, looking to, as you've pointed out in the presentation, it needs to be a fuller conversation. We need to have lots of different voices around the table to help us figure out what's best for our community to deal with what's known as gaps in our commemoration and in the knowledge of our history, and in what we can best do to ensure we combat racism and embrace inclusion and diversity. So we at this point are saying we're looking to staff to sort of help compile some of that. I've had at least 24 conversations in the last couple of weeks, some of them with some of those folks that you'd pointed out. I was very pleased at that. You mentioned African Nova Scotia Affairs, and one of the panelists at that webinar last week was Natasha. Her name's not in front of me, but the CEO of that office was on that webinar offering some advice. So she certainly is someone that we would want to consult with. But informally, in making a motion of council to move forward, I guess we're just looking at what direction we give our staff in just getting us started. And you've already provided a lot of help in that regard. But if you have, Councillor Risser suggested, perhaps you would have something to add at this point.
Thank you. I also appreciate the recognition of needing folks who have had the lived experience to come forward. And like I said, there are some concerns with diversity and inclusion committees, but what can be very functional, and like you're saying, is a working group, right? Where you're bringing the people who, quite often are salaried to participate in those groups, and they're coming as professionals. I sit as part of a working group. I'm a board member for SEED that's working with Louise DeLille in Shelburne to have clean water for the Black residents of South End Shelburne. And at that table for the working group includes, Housing Nova Scotia and the Department of African Nova Scotian Affairs, as well as the the town councillor who's agreed to sit on the committee. And those meetings take place, at the Black Loyalist Center. So the conditions for comfort and safety have been created, as well as, who's chairing the meeting, who's establishing the terms of reference. So making sure that you do that work in the beginning, I think that's the best place to begin, is to not begin without ensuring that you have that representation there, to acknowledge that it's a conversation that has to happen, that we don't necessarily have the skills, I don't claim to speak on behalf of visibly diverse people, that we don't have the skills to have that conversation without those people in the room, and to ensure that any work that we do includes them at the table from the beginning, and is aware that it's not always a safe environment. So to be cognizant of that, to create some safety.
No, I've been been made much more aware of the fact that sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So you do what you're used to doing, and not realizing that very practice is exclusionary because you don't realize it is. So you need to we need to take steps to address that. And as you say, the meetings may not be at town hall, they may not be via Zoom, they may be in a way and shape that it encourages the participation of those people we need to be speaking to.
Yeah.
So thank you. I guess I'm struggling a bit just with the formation of direction to staff. Yes, Councillor Risser.
I'll give it a shot and we'll see where it goes. But I think perhaps an initial first step is for staff to, in consultation with appropriate people and experts and so forth, provide a staff report to us on a potential future direction for task force or a working group or a process to have this conversation, and yeah, and to begin the process of, the reconciliation and such that we need.
And
Part of that process could involve as well some sort of a survey, like a Project Lunenburg style survey that allows people who have experienced racism within the town of Lunenburg to share their experiences anonymously, that could be collated as part of that report, to give sort of a baseline of what kind of experiences people have had, but maybe have not had a vehicle for sharing.
okay, so I would, just as I don't disagree, I was just going to say, in the interest of time, that could be either just an open invitation, so that we're informed by those who come forward. But I think to do it well, we may want to make that a further down in the process.
The working group, yeah.
Yeah, but sure. So that's Councillor Risser was forming a motion, and is there a seconder for the motion as it was stated? And we can certainly look to clarify. Thank you, Councillor Bachman, for seconding that. And perhaps I can ask staff to weigh in on how it may be captured, so that we can flesh it out or distill a little further. And you can also then weigh in for us if there are challenges or specifics you need clarified from us.
I think that's fine, Your Worship. I would read back the draft motion. I think might be helpful just to make sure that it's been accurately captured, or if anything needs to be added or deleted.
If you wouldn't mind, that would be great.
Sure. So it was moved by Councillor Risser, seconded by Councillor Bachman, for staff in consultation with the appropriate people and experts with a view to performing a task force or special committee to begin the process of reconciliation that we need.
Okay. Maybe we could.
I'm going to break it down a bit.
Just make me sound more elegant than I was.
I wonder if we can add to the reconciliation specifics towards, combating racism, discrimination, and then, and I'll look to you, Jessica, but I really like the words inclusion and diversity. But I recognize that they can sometimes be watered down to,
I have done a lot of work in terms of like working with companies like Etsy and Airbnb around like diversity and inclusion initiatives. I would say that is separate from anti-racism, and it is separate specifically from anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism. And I think it's important that we be explicit in the language that we use, so that diversity and inclusion includes includes people with disabilities, includes seniors, it includes children. It's a very, very big tent. And in this case, we need a smaller tent with a narrower definition that would fit under an umbrella of diversity and inclusion, but it has a more specific mandate. So I would include the language of anti-racism, as well as the more specific recommendations around anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism.
So then, sorry, Jessica, and apologies if I fudged any of the vocabulary, but it is hard to sometimes know what's the right word to use. So then a task force with a view towards anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism would be.
Or anti-racism, and then you have
anti-racism, yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Can you capture that, B?
Well, it might be helpful to look at the drafting of the motion incrementally. So if I just read one part of the motion at a time, and you could tell me where there are some amendments that need to be made. So again, moved and seconded for staff in consultation with the appropriate people. Is that acceptable thus far?
I would say the like stakeholders, right? Appropriate people should be defined somehow, right?
Stakeholders and experts.
Stakeholders and experts with a view to forming a task force or special committee. So it reads with a view to forming a task force or special committee.
To address anti-racism or to
Yes,
promote anti-racism.
To promote anti-racism. And I know you hear me typing in the background. The mayor has told me that before. I apologize.
No worries. It's my fault for not phrasing it elegantly enough to begin with. So
to promote anti-racism. So putting it in the positive. So moved and seconded for staff in consultation with the appropriate stakeholders and experts with a view to forming a task force or special committee to promote anti-racism. End of sentence. Correct.
And then to Jessica's point, I think with a particular emphasis on anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism.
With a particular, okay, thank you. I will add that.
So with that discussion having taken place in the formation of the of a motion, other members of council have thoughts or would like to weigh in on this. Is it all sounding as you hoped it would, or think it's headed in the right direction? Okay, without having to, with doing the informal vote before the vote, which wasn't really the intent, but anyway, so yeah, so we will look for that. That's a start. That gets us started. That captures a lot of the, you know, the core things we were talking about, and then we can get down to hopefully the sooner we get some of that information back, we'll be better equipped to roll up our sleeves and work with those people who need to be
Just have one last question. Is there a timeline for the creation of that staff report? Would there be an expectation of when that report would happen?
So I did actually anticipate that. I spoke with B about that earlier. We would look for a report for our next full meeting of council, which is over the summer. We have a somewhat abbreviated meeting schedule, so it would be the end of August. There was concern that with vacation times and with, you know, not being able to reach people, you know, in particular jobs because of vacation times and so on, a recommendation may not be fully baked by that time, but that we could look for a report as to progress. You know, the work to date, progress to date by that time was what the discussion I had with staff for council's information. But yes,
just wanted to note, Your Worship, the election looms largely on our day-to-day work as well too, the municipal and CSAP elections. So there's a lot of daily preparation work that has to be done. So I think under any other circumstance, we could probably move this ahead much sooner, but we will try our utmost to do that.
I appreciate you pointing that out, because it's a very real thing as far as resources. You know, it taps us out at the best of times, and pandemic times a little more so, having to make a whole bunch of amendments to things that would normally be a matter of course, and certainly taxing on staff. But Councillor Rister had wanted.
Well, just a question to staff, given that some of the recommendations that Jessica quite rightly put forward are time sensitive, specifically to the Project Lunenburg one. I mean, they're looking to have us a draft of the CCP delivered by August 14th. So I'm wondering, can the suggestion there be left with staff to make sure that the appropriate people are going over the draft CCP with and providing the appropriate lens on that work?
Ms. Renton, I see Ms. Sutherland's there with us as well. I don't know if either of you are able to speak.
I'll defer to Dawn. Certainly, she's more involved with the project, Your Worship, more able to speak to it.
but I can't turn my camera on.
Okay, we hear you.
Okay, certainly we'll take it to the next meeting of the steering team, and make Project Lunenburg aware of it, our consultants, Upland Consulting, because they have taken, they have put a lot of effort into being inclusive and, doing focus groups, stakeholder groups. But obviously you can't get everyone. In terms of someone external to review the CCP, is that what council is asking?
Well, I'm
Yeah.
just asking if Jessica's suggestion can be accommodated in the time frame so as not to defer the draft.
Good question. I'd have to find someone to do that work and money to pay them or a volunteer.
I like to get paid.
Yeah, so do I,
Also,
Jessica.
I've done a report for you guys for free. We've gone two so far. One was a Live Work Task Force Committee, but I would be available to either make recommendations of other people or to go over my concerns with the Project Lunenburg with the consultants, because I have familiarity with that work and have done it before.
That would be wonderful. So we'll put everybody in contact. Thank you, Jessica.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that all being said, I think we are probably ready for a motion. Or
For
for
the
the vote
question.
on the motion. Yeah, for the question. So all in favor? And there's no one to oppose. It's passed unanimously. So the motion is carried and we look forward to that report. And thank you again, Jessica, for your input and
Thank you
your,
so much. Back to work. Thank you. Have a
okay,
great day.
bye-bye.
Bye.
And looking at the time, perhaps it's appropriate that we take a brief recess and reconvene at 3:25 and pick up on particularly the remaining of our agenda and concentrate on our bolded items at that time. So see you back shortly. It is 3:25, so I'm hoping, oh, there you are. I know it wasn't a very long recess, and but in light of what we have to cover, hoping everybody is ready to get back at the agenda. So just let me see. So, and I see all of councillors are back on board. Ms. Renton, are you back at the keyboard for us? Maybe not. Ms. McCallum, do you know if it's okay to move ahead with the meeting? Call it back to order? Just wondering if there's backup somewhere.
Oh, looks like we may have lost Ms. Renton, but we can go ahead and I can capture.
Okay, I guess.
Ms. Renton is rejoining. I was just speaking with her in the hall, so she's joining back. Yep, there she is.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, very good. Okay, so we will call the meeting back to order and we'll proceed. And the next item on our agenda is a bolded item, so we'll move right into that under business arising from the minutes and unfinished business. We have corporate services, municipal and CSAP elections 2020 proposed resolutions, and we're grateful to have Mr. Burke here as our returning officer and as the person that has to look after all of this for us. And we have a number of resolutions to get through. So I will turn the floor over to you, Mr. Burke, and you can guide us through them, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will try and get through them as quickly as possible. I have forwarded a letter explaining the process. The first resolution is, that was up on the screen a second ago, is a resolution essentially dealing with rejected ballots and spoiled ballots. When we drafted the bylaw, I looked at bylaws from other municipalities, and it appears that some refer only to rejected ballots. But after speaking with IntelliVote, it was clear that you can log into the system and decline or reject a ballot, but you can also log into the system and spoil a ballot. So there are two options. So I had to amend it, and I referred to it in the ad in the newspaper and on the website as well, so that the public would have notice of this. So I would propose that one of the councillors move that resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Risser. Is there a seconder? For Councillor Croft, thank you very much. So, and it is before, as it's presented, as explained, we do need to formally approve the resolution as it's presented. Is there any discussion? Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried and that resolution is approved.
Okay. Resolution number 2, Your Worship. And as I indicate in the letter, initially there was a form of resolution or form of bylaw that went, that may have been involved in the agenda package, but then the June 16th, there was a slight amendment because it changed in 7B1 may to shall, which requires one polling station. So it requires us to have a polling station. And in 7B2B, it required that the polling station shall be open on each advanced polling day as well. So that was the only change. And I wanted to make it sure, it was our understanding that that version, the June 16th version, was the one that was the subject of the first reading on June 23rd. And the Also, there was some discussion about alternative voting, polling days and advanced polling days, and also sections of the act. But my understanding was that there wasn't any amendment per se to the bylaw at that time. So unless there's some questions, I'll just explain the process from there. Okay, and so essentially we've incorporated in resolution number 2, we've incorporated the amendment that is included in resolution number 1 that deals with spoiled ballots and rejected ballots. This is the alternative voting bylaw that will allow us to have electronic voting via the internet and also telephone voting, and will also allow council to determine that it shall be only by electronic and telephone. And therefore I propose that one of the councillors move that resolution.
Councillor Isser, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Bachmann, Councillor Bachmann, I saw first, and thank you also, Deputy Mayor. So that's resolution as explained and as is printed before us for our review and as has been included in the agenda package. Oh, but we have a question. Yes, Councillor Croft.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a question there on the second part of that resolution there where it says to publish a notice in the progress bulletin. Wondering if that should be expanded somewhat.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I couldn't quite hear that. But my understanding is that the reference was to the second paragraph of the resolution, which deals with publication. Under the Municipal Government Act, a bylaw becomes effective upon publication. So I will be putting an ad in the newspaper next week, if that was the question.
I guess if you can hear me now, the question is the progress bulletin the only avenue for that advertisement?
That is the newspaper that we've been using. I think the Chronicle Herald might have a broader coverage, but it would certainly be more expensive, I would expect.
Yes, I think that the act is a bit dated in that it references just newspaper publication. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Burke?
Well, it's certainly, and I can grab the section of the act, but I believe it does refer to a newspaper circulating in the community.
Yeah. So I think that would keep us in. It would keep us in consistent with the requirements of the act too.
And that has been our practice, Your Worship. We publish all of our bylaws in the progress bulletin.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, as is was witnessed today, they are read. Ms. Kelly's presentation to us was in direct response to that publication of amendments forthcoming and public response to that. So and that would have been published likewise in the progress bulletin. Yes. So although I'm assuming we would likely also, as is necessary, on our website or wherever it might be appropriate to do so, we would be in keeping with the act to do it there. So any further question then? Oh, yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Worship. Less a question than just a concern to note. Given that we are moving to an online and telephone only voting format, I'm worried about particularly seniors who might be used to a paper ballot and they're perhaps not wanting to put them at risk because they're an at-risk group a risk group for COVID, but at the same time, making sure that the election is accessible to everyone. And particularly in this new format, you know, there's seniors, there's also low income people, you know, who may not have internet access in the same way. So I'm just wondering, Pat, what steps are being taken to make sure that under this new format and under these difficulties, everyone who wants to cast their ballot is going to do so in a system that's accessible to them?
Thank you, Councillor Risser. Your Worship, the format for an electronic election is you can't have just one mode of voting. It can't be just via the internet. There has to be a secondary mode of voting. And the second one would be telephone. So if a person doesn't have a computer or use the internet, they can vote by telephone. And I think at one of the conferences, video conferences that I attended in the last month or so, I think they said that 99% of people do have telephones. Having said that, people still will be able to come to the town office on the 2 advance poll days and on election day to vote with a computer at the town office. And we're still sorting that out as far as how to do that safely during a pandemic. We're going to try and reduce as much as possible the people coming in by, you know, having a helpline so that if people are having challenges voting with a computer, that hopefully we'll be able to walk them through that. But if people don't feel comfortable and they want to come in, then they will have time on the advanced polling days and on ordinary polling day to come in and vote.
You're muted, Your Worship.
Any other questions? So are we ready for the vote then on this resolution? All in favor? No one's to oppose, so the motion is carried. Resolution is passed.
Okay.
That's number 2.
Resolution number 3. I don't see it on the screen yet. Okay, here we go. This is Heather McCollum is the revising officer. We receive our initial or preliminary list of electors from the province. We received that on July 15th. We will now have to go through a form of revision of the list to try and remove those who are deceased who may still be there, or add people who apply. And we will be advertising in the newspaper that Heather will be having sittings during, I think it's 3 days in August. And there will be times when people can call the office to find out whether they're on the list. In fact, the first ad, I think, goes in the newspaper tonight. So this is just indicating the town council has to determine when the revising officer returns the amended list to the returning officer. And it has to be at least the day before the first day for filing nominations, which is the 27th, I believe. So we've selected the 24th. And so this is just directing the revising officer to return the revised list to the returning officer by August 24th.
Okay, is there someone who could move that resolution? Thank you, Deputy Mayor moving, seconded by anyone? Councillor Croft, thank you. And any discussion with respect to this resolution? Questions of Mr. Burke? Seeing no indication of that. All in favor? No one to oppose. Motion is carried. Resolution is passed.
Okay, resolution number 4. And you'll note I have a note to be confirmed at the August council meeting, because ordinarily you probably wouldn't pass the resolution until the bylaw is published, but we're running into a time crunch here, and I'm likely going to get this confirmed at the meeting in August. But I think we have to pass the resolution now, or I recommend that we do. And this is saying that the voting will be by telephone and by personal computing device via the internet only.
So motion to move that resolution forward. Thank you, Councillor Risser, seconded by Councillor Bachman. Thank you. Any questions on this one? It's pretty straightforward. We're moving to a new era. All in favor? No one is left to oppose. The motion is carried. Resolution is passed.
Okay, and resolution number 5 deals with entering into the contract with IntelliVote Systems for an electronic voting services for the election in the form of ISINC2, and directing that the mayor and manager clerk are authorized to execute the contract and affix the municipal seal thereto. The contract is very similar to every one of the probably 39 other municipal units that will be using IntelliVote. Halifax is a little different, but essentially it's very similar.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Risser, you'll move that resolution. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mosier, thank you very much. All in favor? Motion's carried. I didn't even ask for questions, but I assume someone would have interrupted me had there been one. Very straightforward, I think.
Okay.
Oh, yes, Councillor Croft.
I was going to ask if those were the only company that offered that type of service, or did we go for tender for that? Or
Your Worship, my understanding is that there's 2 major companies that deal with electronic voting, and it's Cytel, SCYTEL, which is a Spanish company, and IntelliVote, which is based in Dartmouth. And they do elections for everything from unions to leaderships to the whole gamut. Apparently Halifax was sort of the lead municipality, and they determined to go with IntelliVote. And then there was some agreement with, I believe, with the Federation of Nova Scotia Municipalities that other municipal units could tack on with this rate. So I don't think there was any other company that's likely being considered by any of the other municipal units.
Thanks for that explanation. It is a very kind of unique market. Sure. Okay.
Okay, resolution number 6. The reason for this resolution is when we get the list of electors from Elections Nova Scotia, we have to enter into an agreement that we were authorized to enter into, I believe, in March. And this provides that for confidentiality and privacy provisions and so on. And they basically require that if we use another supplier or contractor, we have to incorporate the provisions of this agreement with them so that they're bound by it. And so essentially that's what this contract does. It requires that IntelliVote will basically abide by those provisions.
Okay, so yes, Councillor Risser, moving? Yes, is there a seconder? Councillor Bachmann, thank you. Any questions? No, seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution 6 is passed.
Number 7, Your Worship, relates to my fee, and I don't know if you would like me to step away from the computer for time for the council to consider it or not. Whatever at the pleasure of council.
You're not voting, so we don't have to listen to you.
True. If I might just say that obviously the election is quite different than what we were looking at last fall when we talked about a paper election. And with the pandemic, not only will there be issues about, you know, COVID-19 protection and dealing with polling stations and that sort of thing, but also administering an electronic election when everything is new. And just in the last month, the number of telephone calls and emails from IntelliVote were significant. So it's going to be substantial work, and I think it's appropriate to have this modest fee increase and make it clear that the legal work, like the drafting of the bylaw, is a separate issue, because that isn't ordinarily something that a returning officer would do. It's, you know, the solicitor for the municipality would do it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you wear those, have the unique position of wearing both those hats. So on her behalf, are there Councillor Risser, were you looking to move ahead with the
I
vote?
had a question first.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to ask that.
So Pat, I just want to understand the $2,000, that's not for operational expenses. That's not for anything related to the election. That's what we're paying you
That's
as
my
the returning
fee,
officer to conduct the election.
an increase in my fee, yes.
And that's related to the number of hours that you think you'll be taking on to run an election in an unfamiliar time? Like, what's the justification?
It's very difficult to quantify in advance, because you know, it's you spend a lot of time over you know, 5 months dealing with this, but I suspect that would be probably inadequate compensation if I were truly looking at it for the additional work that will be involved. Just I know that Bea and Heather and I had an hour conference yesterday, just trying to sort out how we would do polling stations, like at the town hall, and staff and that sort of thing. So it's just there's a lot of additional time that will be spent.
Any other questions of Mr. Burke? Yes, Mr. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just clarify, Pat, the work, these resolutions that you're putting forward here, is that part of your job as returning officer, or is that part of your job as town solicitor?
Your Worship, I didn't quite catch that question.
I think Councillor Croft is wondering under wearing which hat are you presenting these resolutions today, returning officer or solicitor?
For the bylaw itself, it would be as solicitor. for the election resolutions that deal with, for example, having the revision officer bring the material back on August 24th. That would be something that as returning officer, I would be doing anyway.
Seems a bit of both.
Yes.
Yes, Councillor Mosier.
Well, thank you, Worship. Well, it's always, how I am in principle, and we do have a contract for our returning officer that's been, signed in good faith. And I understand we have, extenuating circumstances, but it always seems like the town holds the bag on this, whether it's a RFP for a construction contract, and all of a sudden there's unforeseen, what choice do we have? Do we leave the street wide open, or do we close it up and pay the guy the extra money? We go through, extraordinary lengths to sign lease contracts with people, and whenever they feel like it, they can walk away from it. And it's just another example of oh, I think my contract didn't cover everything I thought of, so now I need some more money. I'm sorry. That's just that for me, a card laid is a card played, and it's time when people should honor what they stepped up to the plate for.
Your Worship, if I may state that at the time that the fee was set, it was going to be an all-paper election. And so this is certainly something very different than what we had contemplated.
One more thing, though, I will add, this is all speculation, and this could have led to, being less work than we anticipated as well. And it never seems like the people that sign the contracts then come back and say, oh, I can offer you this savings on the contract I just signed. They end up taking their full fee and walking away.
So are there other comments, questions to ask? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to Peter's point, maybe that'll be the next election after we've gone through this one, and we'll have a better handle on what's going to happen. But there's so many unforeseen things. There's so many unknowns that I can sympathize with Pat, but I can also say, well, it may be easier, but we don't know. And so, I'm fine with the increase, and let's hope that it doesn't go beyond that, as in, it doesn't end up being far more work than what Pat's even expecting now. So
I think there is a better understanding now of the fact that it's a change midstream is creating work. So whether the system will provide efficiencies that we didn't recognize because we were familiar with and had a well-oiled machine as far as the old system of paper ballots was concerned, and whether this new means of voting can be streamlined and conducted in a way that's less expensive going forward, I think is something we'll learn from the experience of having gone through it. But the fact that the things have to be changed, and the system has to not only change to electronic voting, but also accommodate any in-person contact for the circumstances of a pandemic, are an additional layer that add complexity and thought and planning that in either of the other two scenarios under normal circumstances wouldn't exist. So we do have the resolution number 7 for our consideration. Yes, Deputy Mayor, you would move it. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bachman, thank you. Any further discussion before the vote? Okay, then, all in favor? Opposed? motion and resolution is carried, and their councillors Croft and Mosier cast votes in the negative. So there was the additional
Resolution number 8, Your Worship.
that is part of the package.
Again, because we are going the alternative voting route, it will be necessary to develop procedures and forms for the electronic election. That I've been working on, and it should be completed very shortly. I've also run it by the IntelliVote company to determine what suggestions they may have for changes. But it requires that the advance poll dates be set before at least 60 days, excuse me, it has to be in the forms and procedures, which deals with the advance poll. So we have to set the advance poll date now, and also the alternative polling days. And what we are suggesting is the advance poll will be Tuesday, October 13th, which is mandated, and Thursday, October 8th, which is a work day, and it was felt by staff that it would be better, more easily covered by staff on that day. And also that we have alternative polling days. They will commence on Thursday, October 8th at 12 noon and end on a Saturday, October 17th, which is ordinary polling day at 7 p.m. I was speaking with Dean Smith and Diane Poole, who is the person assigned to us by IntelliVote Systems earlier or last week. And they indicated that we were originally going to commence voting on Saturday the 10th. But they said if we did that, we'd be the last one of 40 to commence alternative voting. They thought there was some benefit at least having a couple weekdays in the previous week to allow people to vote, particularly given that the following Monday is a holiday. And so this resolution basically states that the advance poll should be on Thursday, October 8th and Tuesday, October 13th, and the alternative polling days shall commence on Thursday, October 8th at 12 noon and end on Saturday, October 17th at 7 p.m.
Okay. So is there a mover for that? Councillor Risher moving that resolution? Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Croft. Any questions, Mr. Burke, with regard to these dates being set? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, through to Pat, like the alternative date is where somebody who doesn't have a phone, doesn't have a computer, or doesn't know how to do it can come in and be helped with. Is that going to be an office like in the town hall or?
No. Through you, your worship, the alternative voting days are the days during which people can vote by computer or handheld device via the internet or by telephone. So that's when the system opens up to allow you to vote and when it shuts down. So it will open up on October 8th at 12 noon and will shut down on a Saturday, the 17th at 7 p.m. Now, we will be setting up a polling station in the town hall, and likely the days will be the advanced poll days, which will be Thursday, the 8th, Tuesday, the 13th, and Saturday, the 17th, where people, if they don't have a computer, don't feel comfortable using a phone, they can come into the town office and vote using the computer.
Thank you.
Also, we've got to try and figure out how we're going to do Harborview Haven and the hospital. Because if we're in the second wave of pandemic, they may be shut down completely to outside visitors. So what we're looking at potentially is having an iPad and appointing staff members as DRO and poll clerk, and have them take it around to the persons who are able to and want to vote. So we'll be working that out. But these determine the advanced poll dates and the alternative polling days during which you can vote electronically or by phone.
Thank you.
Okay, someone like to move that resolution then? Or was that moved? Sorry.
I moved it, Your Worship. I
Yes.
can't recall if somebody seconded. Danny
Councillor
seconded.
Croft.
Okay, sorry. Yes, you did. So are we ready for the vote then? Okay, all in favor? No one's opposed, so that resolution is passed and motion is carried. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Your Worship.
All the work on that. We're getting closer to being ready.
I believe the CAO has suggested I should stay on because I think there's the waste management bylaw and the parking meter bylaw as well.
Right. So we are going to have a look. We're at 4 o'clock already. I'm hoping council will indulge us prioritizing what is left on our agenda. Looking at, there are 5 more things bolded on the agenda for our discussion today. Yes, Councillor Mosier.
Thanks, Your Worship. I would suggest that we do 6E, because I know those recommendations are time sensitive. There's folks want to get along with that work that's being suggested. And I think 5B, I know folks on Archibald Street are very anxious to hear what we'd like to do there. And then I would suggest we adjourn after that.
So sorry, you had said your first one?
6E. Those are the 2 recommendations from the Heritage Advisory Committee.
Okay. And there's also the tender award for there's some, I don't know how there's some time sensitivity. I'm not sure how much for that one as well. And the water treatment roof, which I don't think was a long one, but also with regard to tendering. So with the fact that we're not scheduled to meet as full council again until the end of the month, ask council to give some consideration to either dealing with more of this today or scheduling a separate meeting sooner than the end of the month. Yes, Councillor Rister and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I'm happy to dispose of quick items, and I do think another meeting is going to be necessary, and I'm happy to have one.
Okay. So yes, Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, I was just going to suggest, let's go to at least 4:30 and see how far we get, and then decide then if we, are they important? Because I think in a half an hour we can deal with the ones that that Peter mentioned, and perhaps the one with the ice resurfacer and so on. I think give us another 20 minutes to a half an hour, and I think we can get rid of the pressing items, the date sensitive ones.
So if the first, the next that of the ones that was mentioned is under Public Works, the Archibald Street sewer main extension request installation, cost comparisons, and existing sewer main plan that was provided. So I'm not sure how quick this one will be, but don't believe we have Mr. Tillard with us, or do we?
Yes, Your Worship, I am here.
Oh, sorry. Okay, there. Your identifier is a little, you're a mystery person for us, but thank you very much for joining us. And there was a report provided on this, and diagrams and so on. So could you distill it very quickly for us, please?
Sure, Your Worship. So the request last time we had this discussion was to go back and look at this project as an in-house project and see what costs would be associated with that and the time frame associated with it, or the length of time it would take to do it. And as I'm not sure if everyone recalls, but the person who made the request has a private sewer line running all the way down Archibald Street to connect to our wastewater sewer on Brook Street. That means he's got his private line is in our roadway essentially. And they had requested that the town consider putting a mains down the street so that he could go to normally as we would expect normally to do to connect from the house, perpendicular out to a main on the street. Which he's quite happy to do that if the main were there available for him to use. There's, I believe, also one other residence beside that resident that has the same situation. So I guess the long and the short of Your Worship is that we did an in-house estimate. I don't have the document in front of me. I'm traveling, but I think it was around $52,000 or $52,500 for Public Works to undertake that work ourselves. That would be labor and materials cost for doing that. And so I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'm not sure if there's technical questions around that or not, but.
Okay, and I know as compared to 130,000 for the work to be tendered, and there's certainly some time issues as far as putting our staff on this work, and the fact that it's unbudgeted at this point in time. So we'd be looking to borrow.
And if I may, Your Worship, I guess I could just add a little to that point.
Sure.
That, a late breaking development. We had just received word this morning that we have been approved for our FRIP funding for our flood mitigation study, which does then free up just about $24,000 worth of deed transfer tax. So if council was to consider this, we wouldn't have to borrow the entire amount. We could apply that internal deed transfer tax towards that project instead of the one that we had initially thought we might have to apply it to. So I just wanted to update because that's sort of late breaking news.
That was late breaking news. Yes, exciting news. Yes, Councillor Mosier, and then the Deputy Mayor.
Two questions. Well, one question first, I guess, to Lisa. That $24,000, then, if we would, we could carry that over into the next budget year if needed, correct?
Certainly, Councillor Mosier, yes, it certainly doesn't need to be expended this particular year. Those are our own deed transfer tax funds we can use to which, everything within the bylaw.
Okay, great. So anyway, based on that, then, I mean, I would move that we complete this project in-house for the 2021-22 budget year and have the work done, when construction season can start next year.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Okay, and Deputy Mayor, you'd wanted to speak as well?
Oh, I did. Just a question through to Ian, and I see Mike Smith is on the line as well. So, Ian, do they have to, like the two residents, would they then have to pay to get their laterals done, like new laterals done as well then?
Yeah, that would be my assumption, or that would be the normal way we would do our business, so that the residents would then apply for connection to that, and we would pay for, and they would pay for that. Sorry, not us.
Would we get basically a confirmation from the two of them that they're going to do it then before we put this line in? Or is it doesn't matter? I don't know.
Well, yeah, Your Worship, I'll just say that I think from the indication, I've not spoken to the requester directly, but certainly the tone I got from the inquiries I saw through email and whatnot, this is a pretty urgent matter with them.
Yeah, with my understanding, like the line, this what is it, no cave pipe which is caving in. You know, if they're not gonna fix those ones, you know, then wouldn't be much point in redoing the street, but, so if they're gonna do those, then yeah, let's do the street.
So that's for, in the fall as was suggested is, Councillor Croft, you had raised your hand, and Councillor Risser.
Thanks, Your Worship. Deputy Mayor asked the question that I was going to ask. And I just wondering why this can't be done this fall. Is it a matter of manpower, or what's the status of the that we can't do it?
Your Worship, I can answer that. Essentially that is correct. We've got our hands full at this point. We're also doing some other internal work around the Brook Street Station. We've still got all our sidewalk work to do, all of our paving work to do, or I think already our paving work to do. So the thought was to defer this until the spring when the weather permitted, and plan it. Otherwise, we will be certainly looking at deferring some other work. We're going to try to do it this year.
Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Worship. I'm fine with Councillor Moser's motion. I'm just wondering, this isn't the only street that has this issue in town, so what measures are we going to be taking proactively to deal with this on an ongoing basis?
I don't know if there are too many others that are in like circumstances. This is maybe not unique, but pretty, I don't know if Mr. Tillard's able from the.
Yeah, I don't know if I
from the
misread the map, but it
drawings.
looks like there are a few in Newtown.
I don't know if you're able to speak to that at all, Mr. Tillard, whether or not this is a unique circumstance.
Yes, Your Worship, but I don't know per se how many other residents are in the same position. I'm afraid I don't. But I do know that we have, I believe we have one line with this no corrode pipe that's ours that I think is scheduled down the road for replacement. But in terms of other private residents, I don't know the scope of that.
Okay. Presumably that's something that might be fleshed out a little more fully when we're doing our distribution and circulation studies and so on. And have, yeah,
That's correct,
that,
Your Worship.
yeah, have that mapping more clearly defined for us. So there's a motion that this work be undertaken by our staff in the next fiscal year. Is that as I recall? Am I getting
That's
that right?
correct. And that we would carry the 24,000 in gas tax from this year to next year to help mitigate any borrowing, or if we can do it all within gas tax next year, that'd be great.
Deed transfer tax, I think.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to know. It was deed transfer tax.
Yeah, so which is our own money as opposed to gas tax coming from the feds. And but it's freed up from the fact that we received provincial.
And we can't spend it in something else in the meantime.
Yeah. Well, this other money freed that up, which is really nice to get that grant from, and I think that was from both levels of government. I'd have to look at the letter again, Ms. Dagley, but
it was just from the provincial government, Your Worship.
provincial government. Okay, yeah, flood mitigation. So we're always happy to receive that. So is there any other questions then? Are we ready for the question on the motion? And do we need the motion? Is that motion understood? By staff and council?
Would you like me to read it, Your Worship? Because it does need to take make some slight revisions from what's in the staff report. Would that be okay?
I think it's a good idea to read it because obviously there'll be another council dealing with this. So we want to make sure it's clear.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Mosher, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, that the town budget for the requested Archibald Street sewer main extension from the intersection of Brook and Archibald Streets to 66 Archibald Street to service this property and 58 Archibald Street. And staff will do this work in spring, summer 2021 when the frost comes out of the ground. And it goes on to say in the staff report, and council has approved a budget for same. So it would appear as if it is tied to budget 21-22 approval. I don't know if you now actually want to put this forward and if it's possible, Ms. Dagley, as a pre-approved capital project for 21-22.
That would be my assumption, that it's a pre-approved capital item for 21-22. And that there would be $24,000 worth of detransfer tax allocated to it to mitigate borrowing. And that the work could begin as soon as April 1 of 2021.
That's my intention as well, is to have it pre-approved.
Thank you for clarifying that.
To everyone. For me, this is a question of risk, and I'm a little uncomfortable with pre-approving something for a future budget that far in advance. I'd like to see the work done sooner, but without knowing what impact it would have, like what we would be displacing by doing that, and if there would be any cost savings by not doing something else. I wouldn't be prepared to say it needs to go ahead this year, but I certainly think I would like to know that, would have liked to have known that information before deciding one way or the other. So I just throw that out because that's where my head is now. It's a precarious situation, and one I think, as Councillor Mosher's looking to make sure it is resolved, but certainly time is of the essence, and feel not quite fully prepared to pass this one off. But is everyone, any other questions or comments from any other members of council? All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried, and I will vote in the negative for the reasons I stated. So there is then, in order that council has mentioned priority with the Heritage Advisory Committee, the recommendations that there are people waiting for a response, I believe, on those things. So this is under 6 committee meeting recommendations, reports, and notices of motion. So Councillor Mosher, would you like to speak to that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The first recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee is recommended that council approve the issuance of a heritage permit for the installation of a ramp at 10 Falkland Street as Schedule A with the following conditions: provided the ramp is located on the west elevation as submitted, and provided the ramp is constructed as submitted. I would so move.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Risser. Any discussion? It's explained quite thoroughly in the report, I believe. Questions? Seeing none. I don't see everyone on my screen. I'm sorry. Can we go back to, there we go. Thank you. You want to go into a vote without being able to see everyone. So if there aren't any questions or comments, all in favor? Motion is carried, or recommendation accepted. Motion is carried. And there's a second.
There is a second recommendation, and I hope our new bylaw will take care of this, that it doesn't have to come before council again. But anyway, it is recommended by the Heritage Advisory Committee that council approve the issuance of a heritage permit for the installation of a metal roof on 111 Townsend Street as Schedule B with the following conditions. 1, provided the metal roof has narrow spacing between ribs. Spacing between ribs shall not exceed 18 inches. Provided the metal roof has a medium tone matte color as submitted in the application and attached. 3, provided a snow ice guard is installed along the bottom of the roof's slope in proximity to the fascia board to control large slabs of ice and snow from falling off the roof. And number 4, provided the installation shall be completed and consistent throughout the exception of the, with the exception of the bell tower, which is excluded from the application. And I would so move that.
Moved by Councillor Mosier, seconded by Councillor Risser, that this recommendation be approved. Any questions, discussion on this recommendation? I see none, so all in favor? Any opposed? Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you for that. So we can then circle back to look at the item under 5B3, which is bolded as well. And that is under Public Works, the water treatment plant roof vent repainting capital budget increase requirement. And there was a staff report there provided by Mr. Bracken. Yes, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
No, I'd move the recommendation.
Okay, expediting things along. It's fairly straightforward, I believe. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Bachmann. Thank you. Mr. Bracken is here. Are there any questions of him with respect to the report provided? And where is the recommendation to approve an increase in the project's budget to allow for the project to be completed as followed, with a total cost of $7,431.25. The draft motion is just out of sight on the screen there, but yeah, from 5,000 to 7,500. Any questions? And I think I asked that. I don't see any indication of such. And I do see all councillors. So are you ready for the vote? All in favor? And no one is to oppose. Motion is carried unanimously, and that budget increase is approved. And next is under 5C, Recreation Department, the proposed award of arena ice resurfacer. And I believe Ms. Cunningham is with us with respect to that. It's a little fuller report, but there is a staff recommendation for consideration with respect to the award of tender. Quickly myself. That the 2021 Olympia resurfacer be purchased at a tender price of $102,100. And it has some details included as well to be clear about where the money is coming from and what's to be expended if the recommendation is approved. So are there questions? When willing to, Councillor Mosier and Councillor Bachmann, I saw your hands go up simultaneously, so go ahead, Councillor Mosier.
Thanks, Your Worship. The only thing I'm a little apprehensive on is doing this approval before we have the plan for, what our arena schedule is going to be. It might be premature. I'd rather defer this until we have that plan in front of us and approved.
Okay. And Councillor Bachmann, you too had your hand raised, I believe.
I was going to recommend the motion with the knowledge that we may be delaying the opening, but the timeline for this machine is quite extensive. So whether we open or not this year, depends whether or not we may not have this machine in-house in time. So I'd like to get this process started so that the machine can be ordered and here as soon as possible. So I'd be prepared to move that we purchase the 2021 Olympia Ice Resurfacer purchased from Monarch Enterprises at the tendered price with the 2 spare blades and 1 propane edger.
As recommended by staff, and the Deputy Mayor is indicating a seconder for that motion. So is there further, yes, you'd like to speak to it?
Well,
Deputy Mayor?
I guess one concern that I've got about changing the timing is that, MODL is going to have a new council and a new budget year next year. And, we could lose potentially 20% of the cost of the equipment by not doing it now when we have the approval for this year. So that drives me.
Well, likewise for other funders, potentially, there are, some other funding sources secured at this point in time for the purchase to move ahead. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Mosher?
Well, the last time we discussed this, there was some question on which was the lowest bid, because the lowest bid wasn't the lowest bid because it had other items that, added into this. So what exactly are we, which one are we actually bidding on? Is it the lowest? Is it the highest? Is it the lowest with the, is it, what's the bottom line, I guess?
Ms. Cunningham, are you able to speak to that?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So it is, a bit confusing. So the Monarch Enterprise is the Olympia, which they had the tender price of 102,100, and Saunders had the Zamboni, which came in tender price lower, which was 91,090. We are wanting to go with the Olympia 2021, which came in at a tendered price higher at the 102,100. However, as noted in the staff report, the tender included a list of minimum specifications as well as optional equipment. So there are several optional equipment that was added at an additional cost by Saunders Equipment for the Zamboni, which added an additional $13,038 plus HST. So this brought the Zamboni to a total cost of $104,128 plus tax. So that made it at a higher price than the Olympia when adding all of those standard equipment that Olympia had. Let me know if you need me to clarify any further.
So it is, in fact, the lowest tendered when it includes all the standard equipment we had requested.
Yes.
Is this shown in that chart? Yes, Councillor Croft.
Thanks, Your Worship. Looking at the two tenderers, Monarch and Saunders, can you tell me where they're located and what the service response time would be from either one?
Yes. So that would be on chart 2, which would be on the 3rd page. So I'm just getting that up. So the service main location for Monarch, which is Olympia, is Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and the Zamboni is Fredericton, New Brunswick. The service call cost for the Zamboni from Dartmouth is the labor is $100 per hour, and there's no additional travel cost. And the first 2 years is free with warranty. For the Zamboni, they have their labor as $130 per hour, and their travel cost is $1.95 per kilometer. And as well, they have no charge the first 2 years. So the Olympia is lower by $30 per hour and no travel cost per kilometer.
Yeah. Good information. Thank you. So any further questions? We ready for the vote on the motion? All in favor? And there's no one to oppose. Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all the work. Thanks for all the work on that. It's a long and detailed process. So we are down to just, oh no, 3, I think, folded items. I think we can defer the last on our last added and last one on our agenda. But we, I think it, and like Locos Hill development proposal, there was quite a lengthy staff report with a lot of points of consideration there. Certainly not a short discussion, I don't think, and it was for information. So although it's been, waiting for our attention, I think it can wait a bit longer unless there's objection from other members of council on that. The waste reduction strategy working group, I know, I'm not sure if members of this group are anxiously awaiting our attention as well, but I know that they have, the stakeholders that are involved have put a lot of time and energy into providing us with this report. I know I spoke with Councillor Bachman about this earlier, and to Ms. McCallum as well. I certainly have been very pleased with how this has worked. It was very rewarding as a member of council to work with other stakeholders in the community to collaborate on a shared goal to do what's best for the community and reducing waste. And I'm very pleased with the report. We did have a public submission in response to the report, having seen it on the agenda. Having said all that, though, I'm looking to members of council as to what they envision happening at this point. Yes, Councillor Croft.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn, please.
And is there a seconder for that motion? As that's not debatable. Seconded by Councillor Mosier. So all in favor of adjournment?
Your worship, could I just note, it might be helpful to clarify that there are no public submissions. There's no one participating in the Zoom meeting to make any submissions regarding the advertised bylaw amendments, just so we don't have to go through the process of re-advertising. The town solicitor was reminding me of that. Thank you, your worship.
Okay, with respect to the all of the changes under 5A, the proposed revisions to parking meter, proposed amendments to hack and trolley, proposed amendment to street encroachment.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was it. Just that we did not receive any written submissions in advance. And just to be clear that no one is on the line or otherwise standing by waiting to make a submission. So I don't know if you just wanted to put that out there, if there was any way of clarifying that of any of the other attendees, your worship, that they're not hoping to make a submission regarding those. So this would avoid the necessity of re-advertising. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And with council's indulgence, I'll just take a second to try to determine that. Ms. McCallum, I'd look to you to help in that. I can review the list of participants that I have access to, and they are all staff council related. Deputy Mayor, did you have a comment with respect to that?
No, just with the, with council's indulgence, I think we could deal with the parking meter bylaw. I mean, those changes were well talked about, and they're, more like, the dollar issue, the fine issue. And the only conversation we might have around it is, back to Donna's presentation on the veteran free parking. But, I feel, Pat's been patiently waiting, and at minimum, we could maybe deal with the one. So my thought with council's involvement.
Councilor Risser is probably going to make a point of order that there's no debating a vote to adjourn the meeting.
Well, I was going to make the point of order that by my read, the motion to adjourn had passed. So,
okay.
And your worship, I was going to echo the Councillor Risser's comments. I think unfortunately, the motion had passed.
And
No, it had, I did not have it recorded as such, Your Worship.
And we
Well,
could,
Sorry,
and
it was me,
I-
Peter, Ronnie, and Danny.
we could ask for a recount.
Yep.
Well, honestly, I wasn't sure if Councillor Bachmann had voted in favor. It seemed to come up a bit belated, and so I was going to clarify that when Ms. Renton checked in with us. But I do think it's out of respect for the public who may have been responding to an advertisement. I felt it really important that we double check on that point. But as to the point of adjournment and the further discussion on that, there shouldn't be any. And so I would suggest, and just clarifying, that Councillor Bachmann did vote in favor of adjournment.
I
Yes.
did, yes, without realizing the lawyer Burke's response to the bylaws, not knowing that we would possibly need to do something with those in order to preclude the paper announcement or whatever. So I'm still not sure what we'd need to do, but I'm sitting here and I'm just about done. It's plenty warm where I am, and I'm ready for it to be over, unfortunately.
And I echo that with Ronnie, and I also think that, you know, why is this brought up to us on the absolute cusp of the 11th hour, right? I mean, this could have been brought to our attention far sooner than this when we debated extending the meeting. So I think this is, it's ridiculous.
With all due respect to councillors' concerns for their own comfort, this is a different way of doing things. And sometimes it's not always foreseen the challenges that we have when we run into these circumstances. So the meeting is adjourned, and hope you all have a good day.